60% mental and 40% physical.
Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
Welcome to a Friday edition of the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon, BIA, the Buckeye Grove Instant Access Podcast, and we are a little bit more than 24 hours away from Ohio State's third game of the season. Trip into Columbus for the Scarlet Knights of Rutgers. Greg Schiano, head coach. Probably not going to be the most competitive of games. We'll get into that in a little bit, but we see upsets all the time, but this one would probably be of a colossal magnitude if it were to happen. But, it's been great to see a couple of weeks of football so far. It's going to be a big weekend in terms of national games. We're going to have Florida, Georgia. We're going to have Notre Dame, Clemson. Maybe not as big of a week in terms of the Big Ten, and as the Wisconsin season continues to free fall as they are unable to play, it'll be a nice week for Ohio State to get through another game, and we're almost to the halfway point of the regular season. But let's turn our attention to Rutgers, and let's go to our good friend Richie Schnyderite of the Night Report, part of the Rivals.com network. And Richie, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kev, thanks for having me.
Let's just look at this from a Rutgers standpoint so far in terms of the season. I mean, how have fans, really kind of approached this season with it being kind of a Frankenstein season of an 8+1 schedule or whatnot, league games only? You guys the team you cover comes right out and puts up a huge win against Michigan State. What's kind of the pulse of your fan base?
I would say going into the season, it was kind of everyone had their questions pretty much. We didn't have a spring football. We didn't get any practices in. The team really didn't get much done. They had, I think, 30+ people quarantined because of COVID in the summer, so it was even tough to get workouts in at that point. But going into the season, there wasn't too high of expectations. They knew there was still a talent gap. They knew Siano was going to have to recruit a couple classes before anything major happened. But that first win against Michigan State was absolutely huge for the program, and just from a rebuilding standpoint, I guess overall, it was just a good momentum booster. And going into the Indiana game, you thought they had a little bit of hope, but I think people still realize that this team still needs a lot of help, and it's going to get there though under Siano.
And I wanted to talk about Greg Schiano, and Ohio State fans are very familiar with him, obviously. Maybe not as familiar as Rutgers fans. The favorite son comes home. I mean, obviously, this is a little bit different being a member of the Big Ten versus the Big East. But, how has that homecoming been? Did people come in and expect, it to be a short path to the type of success that the team had in the other conference, or has there been more of a wait and see, or have there been, realistic expectations? I mean, what's been the approach there?
I think for the most part, it would be pretty much realistic expectations. People know, like I said before, people know this team wasn't good over the past 3 or 4 seasons under Chris Ash. This is the same team that got blown out by Kansas, the same team that lost to Buffalo, that was struggling last year versus UMass and Liberty. They knew it was going to be a big rebuild, but the only bright side about this entire rebuild is that Siano came in right away, added a couple nice pieces, flipped a couple kids from Temple and a couple at Virginia Tech, Purdue, like almost immediately. So the recruiting's still there with Siano, and I think right now they have a top 25 class in 2021. So it's going to take some time, but as long as he keeps getting these solid recruits, it should be a quicker turnaround than expected.
And Rutgers got right into the win column right off the bat in that Michigan State game. Turned them over, 7 times? I mean, 5. I think they forced 6 fumbles, recovered 5 of them, a couple of picks of Rocky Lombardi. I mean, a game that just at no point was competitive. I mean, you get through that type of game, it's great to get the win, but you also really don't know a lot about your team at that point as Michigan State is walking up to the line, handing you the ball and saying, no, go ahead. You go.
Yeah, it was a weird game for sure. I don't think anyone expected 7 turnovers from the Spartans that day. But overall, this Rutgers defense under Siano and former Minnesota DC Rob Smith has been very active at getting the ball, forcing turnovers. They've added a couple pieces from the transfer portal. I'm sure you're very familiar with a couple of them, and former Ohio State Buckeyes, Trey Avery, Brendan White, and former Michigan defensive tackle Michael Dwumfour have all played pivotal roles in this defense turning around this year. And it's tough to gauge how good this team could be just because you'll never – I don't know how often you see 7 turnovers in a game.
And then we fast forward to the Indiana game, and that one is played a little bit more straight up. I mean, what did you learn about Rutgers out of that game? I mean, obviously the scoreboard did not end up the way that the Scarlet Knight fans and everybody associated with the program would have liked, but what were maybe some of the most overriding lessons you got out of that?
I think the number one thing that we came away from that game was the fact that Rutgers doesn't quit. It's not the same old Rutgers from last year or even the year before under Ash where you're down 20, 30 points and then you kind of see that quit in the guy's eyes. It's kind of like, we don't care anymore. We're done for the day. We already know we're getting blown out. Whereas like you see these guys still jumping at the ball, still giving 110% effort nonstop. And then on top of that, I guess it kind of brought fans back down to earth a little bit. Everyone knew it was going to be a tough one in the Big Ten schedule only. They didn't expect a ton of wins, but the Indiana team's very good. That Indiana offense is phenomenal in my opinion. And it's kind of like, I would say a litmus test of sorts. So it kind of put Rutgers fans back in perspective.
You're listening to the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon. I'm joined by the Night Report's Richard Schnyderite, and we are talking about the upcoming game between Ohio State and Rutgers, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on BTN on Saturday. Let's kind of start talking a little bit about this Rutgers team in terms of what Ohio State's going to see. You guys brought in a transfer quarterback, Noah Vedral, former UCF, former Nebraska quarterback. He is, surpassed, or at least at this point, he's gotten the nod over Johnny Langan. What does Noah bring to the table? I mean, what does he do well, and where might he still need to develop some?
I'd say he's a great dual threat quarterback. Doesn't have the best arm in the world. He struggles to hit that like 3rd tier level in passing game, but he's pretty accurate overall. He's a very good game manager. Like I said, he's a dual threat. He's pretty mobile, and that's kind of what you want in this new look Scarlet Knights offense. They try to snap. Offensive coordinator Sean Gleason told us recently they try to snap the ball every 15 seconds. So it's not your old school pro style offense that you're used to seeing from Rutgers. But overall, Vedral's he's nothing crazy. He's not going to wow you with his arm strength or his accuracy. But at the end of the day, he's the best quarterback on the roster. So you got to run with him.
And then you talk about running. I've kind of looked at the stats leading up to this game as we put together our tail of the tape and some other pieces. Doesn't necessarily seem like there is a defined go-to guy in terms of the running game, nor has there been a tremendous amount of consistency at that position. I mean, am I looking at that wrong, or is that a pretty good read that when you're taking over a team that's probably underperformed for several few years, it's kind of all hands on deck until recruiting can maybe right the ship a little?
I wouldn't say you're 100% wrong in that aspect. More or less, I would say Isaiah Pacheco is the lead back. He is that go-to guy. After that, it's kind of been a combo of Aaron Young and Kayron Adams. Kayron Adams had a huge game last week. I think he only got like 5 or 6 carries, but he had 70 yards in the touchdown. But overall, the running backs in general have been struggling, and I don't know if I blame them as much as I blame the offensive line. It is not the best line in the world. Not as bad as it was, I should say, 2 years ago when I think they were ranked near dead last in the country. But they lost their starting right tackle who started over 30 games. They lost to the NFL. They lost starting center Mike Maietti to transfer to Missouri. So it's hard to replace those guys, especially when you don't have great offensive linemen to begin with. And other than that, there's not a ton of depth. They already have 2 true freshmen on the 2 deep at offensive line. So I think I'm going to blame the offensive line for that one.
And I'll get to the OL here in a second, but let's just jump to receiver. I mean, Bo Melton's a name that we've heard for a while. There's doesn't appear to be a Raheem Blackshear on this roster right now. He's not walking through that door. I mean, what is their fortune at that position? Who should Ohio State fans be aware of outside of Mr. Melton?
Outside of Melton, Pacheco has actually been used a little bit in the receiving game here and there. You'll see Aaron Young kind of take over that Blackshear role, so to speak, and hit the slot once in a while instead of just playing straight up tailback. Trying to think. After that, there's, of course, Aaron Krug, Shank, the University of Wisconsin transfer. He's a speedy, small guy out of New York, Erasmus Hall product, which I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. The minute he gets an open space, he's kind of one that's going to be tough to take down. After that, there's Shameen Jones, also out of New York, Cardinal Hayes High School. Besides Melton, I'd pretty much just say it's Cruikshank and Jones as the top 2 receivers, and they haven't really alternated a ton of receivers yet this year.
And now we get back to your favorite position, the offensive line, and they haven't really been able to run block. Doesn't look like they've really been able to pass protect. Fortunately for Rutgers, there's not a Bosa or a Chase Young on this roster at this point. I mean, the Buckeyes have had some success, obviously, with the interior line. You have Tommy Togiai coming off of a 3-sack game. They've got some guys at the end. What can Rutgers do in this type of situation? And, not taking anything away from Michigan State or Indiana, but even without some of the aforementioned Ohio State names, I would say, from my standpoint, it's probably a little bit of a step up in competition that they're going to be facing. And, if this line really is as depleted as, and you would know with some of the departures and, building off of a line 2 years ago that you said that was pretty below average. I mean, what can Rutgers do here?
So the cool thing is that new offensive coordinator Sean Gleason is known as a genius when it comes to play calling and scheming around stuff like that. Ideally, you try to go anywhere away from Tommy as much as possible, I would say. I think you got three sacks you said on the year.
Yeah,
so he's a hard one.
He had 3 sacks just against Penn State, yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be a tough one. He'll probably give the Scarlet Knights a little bit of trouble, but he's good. He's very knowledgeable about the game of football. He's great with schemes, pre-snap stuff, and all that. So ideally, Gleason could draw up a couple of things. Maybe they were pulling the center the other day. They're pulling guards. It's a lot of movement on this offense before they even call hike. So ideally, you can kind of scheme around it. It's going to be tough, but let's see what happens.
Exactly. It probably is going to be tough. We'll talk about the defensive side of the ball and some other big issues here on this after this quick break.
Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com.
Welcome back to the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, and I'm joined by the Night Report's Richie Schnyderite, and we are talking about the upcoming Ohio State-Rutgers game. Let's jump over to the other side of the ball. We won't do position by position as much there. Obviously, some familiar names, as you had said. You got Brendan White, who's a starting safety. When I looked at the 2 deep this week, I saw the name of Malik Barrow, who was played at Ohio State, medically retired before going to UCF and then transferring to Rutgers. Who are some names on this defense that people should be aware of, and what really makes this side of the ball tick?
I'd say this linebacker group. Taishan Fog's a name that I'm sure a couple of you might be familiar with. He was a captain last year under Chris Ash. He led the team in tackles. I think he had near 100 last year. Overall, he's kind of a ball hawk type guy, I would say. He's a hard hitter in the middle. He'll stuff the run here and there. He's had a couple struggles early on, but he should turn it around and kind of have like a solid season like he did last year. Other than that, outside linebacker, Coonley Sadokasi. It's a mouthful to say, I know, but he's been killing it this year. He's already got 2 fumbles recorded, a forced fumble, I think 2 tackles for loss. He's been absolutely phenomenal this year. He actually looks like an NFL player, to be honest with you. And then other than that, I'd say the big guys in the middle, down low in the trenches. Michael Dwumfor has been a stud so far. Can stuff in the middle very well. He's actually been a solid pass rusher from that interior also. And then trying to think, Julius Turner, the other defensive tackle, has actually had a couple good games. He didn't start game 1, but he ended up starting game 2, and he's been solid so far.
I go through the stats, and I see that Rutgers' run defense, in terms of yards allowed, has been pretty good. Is that a matter of who they've gone against, and maybe Indiana not being a great team on the ground in terms of its traditional running backs, and Michigan State really not playing a football game whatsoever with its mistakes? I mean, are you buying or are you selling on the Rutgers run defense?
I think the run defense is actually pretty darn good. I'm going to buy into it. Stevie Scott is no joke when it comes to running backs over at Indiana. And the fact that they were able to hold him to under 100 yards and 20-plus carries was phenomenal. I think this, like I said, that linebacker core is very good. Even the defense, I guess the entire front 7 is just very, very solid. It's not the best in the country, no, but I still think it's a very solid defense. And when you have a guy like Greg Schiano, who's pretty good at calling defenses, I think you'll get a result like this. I don't know if they'll finish in the top 5 in the country, but I do think they'll finish in like I'd say maybe 20, 30 range. I'd probably go more towards the 30 range, but it's a heck of an improvement from last year, a team that was in the complete opposite direction.
I go through the previous 6 games in this series, and sorry to bring up, and it's our job to cover the team. We're not nearly as invested as the fans are. I mean, obviously it's good for business when the team does well, but in that series, Ohio State has broken 50 points in 5 of the 6 games, and in the 6th game, which was the 2015 game, Ohio State scored 49. So for all intents and purposes, they've scored 50 every time around. They've not gotten into 60, but their average is well above 50.0 points. Does this Rutgers defense have what it takes? I don't want to just come out with this question like, oh, what a homer type of question, but no, is this going to be the year that they're going to be able to hold Ohio State under 50? Because the Vegas odds makers don't seem to think so. With what's the line at right now? 38?
38, 37,
yeah,
something like that.
So can they kind of snap that streak?
Can they? I think it's very possible that they can. Will they? It's going to be so tough. I actually was looking at the numbers the other day too, and I found it really interesting that the most points Rutgers ever scored against Ohio State was actually last year under interim coach Nunzio Campanelli, and that was 21. Do I think they get to that number this year? I don't even know if Rutgers gets 21 this year. I think that Ohio State offense led by Justin Fields is phenomenal, and it's almost impossible to stop. And you've seen them. You saw it last week. Ohio State's just a very, very good football team. So I think it's going to be very hard to stop them from hitting that 50-point mark. I could see a similar score to that Nebraska game 1 this year.
You're listening to the BIA podcast first. I want to hit that right there. You're listening to the best BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Richard Schnyderite of the Night Report. As we sit there and we look at all of this, barring a 7-turnover type of game, which, those don't grow on trees, Rutgers has to do what to make this game competitive?
I think you kind of just hit the nail on the head there. You got to force turnovers. And get a. I don't know. It's tough. It's really tough to even say that this game could be competitive. Like I said, that Ohio State team's phenomenal. You just got to make Justin Fields uncomfortable, I would say, and just continue to stop the run and hope your defense can hold them as best as they can.
Ask a bigger picture question now. You get through this game. That's game 3 of the season. Your team has, still more than half the season left. I don't know the schedule off the top of my head, but let's say Ohio State does win this game. I'm not going out on a huge limb there, but 1-2. What does the rest of this season hold in store potentially for Rutgers, just based on the trajectory you've seen out of them, and maybe even throwing in a pinch of just what this team's potential is?
I said it kind of preseason. I don't think this season matters when it comes to wins and losses. Most people didn't even expect them to get one win this early. So, like I said, it's not going to matter when it comes to wins and losses. It's more about showing that you can be competitive in this league and that the coaching staff has a team on the right track. They face Illinois after Ohio State. That's a potential win. Maryland should be a potential win, pending Tua's brother and how good he continues to develop. But other than that, I think you'll probably see a decent amount more losses this season for the Scarlet Knights. But in the end, it shouldn't matter. It should just be more about showing that you guys or that they can compete in this league.
Yeah, I think that when I was looking at Rutgers from a distance to start this season, I put the Maryland game as a winnable game for sure, and then I was like, well, I think that they could probably, maybe have somebody stub their toe against them. I was looking as 2-6, but I've seen some elements as I've gone and watched Rutgers where I'm like, wow, that's they're better at this aspect or they're better at that aspect than I thought they'd be, and then conversely, I've watched and I've been like, ooh, that offensive line is struggling. And, I wasn't going to go there initially, but you went there. So I was like, yeah,
it's hard to ignore.
Yeah, that offensive line is kind of a glaring issue right now. And, maybe some experience will get them there. But, at this point, I just don't know if they have the right, the right 5 pieces out there. But, went to the big picture of looking at this season. Let's go to an even bigger picture. And how long do you think that people need to give Greg Schiano for things to really start changing? In terms of getting through a recruiting cycle or 2 recruiting cycles, because I know as I talk to other Ohio State writers, they're like, well, he's going to have a rude awakening when he realizes that he's not going against, Pitt, Virginia Tech, and WVU here, and he's having to play Penn State, Ohio State, and the likes of those teams, week in and week out. I mean, what are you looking at there?
I think honestly, number one, there's a lot of hate on that old Big East conference, but it was a very good conference. I thought it was solid at year in and year out. So I'm not saying it's as good as the Big Ten is currently, but I'm still saying it was better than most people think. But as far as Siano and how long it's going to take, I think this team did not have a lot of talent on it going into the season. There's a reason he brought in 10 plus transfers this offseason, and there's a reason almost every single one of them is playing or starting. It's going to take some time, but with the transfer portal being the way it is, kind of like a free agency type thing, that's going to help escalate the process a little bit. And then, like I said, he has a top 25 recruiting class in 2021. He's already got 2 2022 commits with potentially a 3rd or 4th on the way soon. I think I'd probably say I'd give him like 3 years before it's a consistent bowl team. I want to say 3 to 4 years maybe. I think when it comes to out of conference games, you keep scheduling the locals like in Syracuse, Temple, so on and try to get those wins there, and then just try to sneak a couple Big Ten games like almost like what they might do this season.
There you have it. So we've got a pretty good idea of what this Rutgers team looks like. We're not going to put Richie on the spot right here for a prediction. We do have that posted on the site in our Behind Enemy Lines feature. And then, of course, you can go and get our predictions over in our staff predictions piece. But, before we call it a show, any other thoughts or things that I did not touch upon that you think Ohio State fans or just fans of the BIA podcast might need to know going into this game?
Just going back a little bit to Sean Gleason and his schemes, I forgot to mention it before, but I think they're gonna see a lot of trickery. You're gonna see a lot of like weird things that you probably haven't seen before. Like, for example, last week against Indiana, Rutgers had 2 quarterbacks on the field for, I want to say, like 15 to 20 snaps during the game, and Johnny Langan and Vedral on the field at the same time. doing end around, any type of all kinds of crazy stuff. And I think you're going to see that this week again as Rutgers hopes to pull somewhat of an upset.
Exactly. Sometimes you do have to, go to the back pages of your playbook and find a couple things. And we certainly have seen that on the Ohio State side of things over the years, where coaches do break every tendency that they have, or at least attempt to, with a lot of unique plays that we've either never seen or go back to an older age of football, if we will. But I want to thank you for being part of the show, and I want to thank all of you for listening to the BIA podcast. We will, of course, follow this up on Monday, where we break down what happened in this game and turn our attention to week 4, when Ohio State will travel to Maryland to take on the Terrapins. But, for now, enjoy the game, enjoy your weekend, be safe, be well, and we will talk to you very soon.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game, exclusively at buckeyegrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcasts Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to click on that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing, and come visit us over at buckeyegrove.com for all the best Ohio State information on the web.